Hello guys, this is Mr. Cole. Our only video lecture for the week today, and should be hopefully a short one. So last week we looked at the presidency of Bill Clinton through the 1990s. And today we're going to talk about George W. Bush from 2001 to 2009. Now, George W. Bush was elected in probably the most contentious and controversial election in modern American history. The election of 2000 was incredibly close. And the issue centered around the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, basically, whichever way Florida went was going to win the election. And the vote was down to a few thousand votes either way. Now, there quickly on election night became the realization that there were some issues with the counting machines in Florida, and that the ballots, which you used to have to punch a hole through who you were voting for, that when those were scanned through, sometimes it was not counted correctly. And as a result, we did not know who was president was going to be for weeks. There was all sorts of lawsuits between Al Gore, who was running against Bush, and eventually it actually made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that Florida could not have a recount, and that as a result, Florida had originally declared for George W. Bush, and so George W. Bush would win the election. Very, very quickly into George W. Bush's presidency, only about less than a year into his presidency, with the horrific events of September 11th, the attack on the World Trade Center, the attack on the Pentagon, the airplane that was crashed in Pennsylvania, that very quickly just totally changed the course of his presidency. We covered this actually on September 11th, so I'm going to kind of save you some time here and move on, knowing the events that I think you know already about what had happened. We're going to really focus more on the impact of it. So basically, right after September 11th, America realizes that terrorism is something that's not going to go away. And that the United States and our relation with the Middle Eastern world, that terrorist attacks, like September 11th can happen again. And that September 11th could have been prevented if we had better security measures in place. So George W. Bush is going to create the Department of Homeland Security, a cabinet-level department whose entire job is to stop the threat of terrorism. These are, many agencies work with the Department of Homeland Security, things like the TSA, the agents that you see in airports, various government agencies, all dedicated to trying to prevent and stop terrorism. Now, I'm not sure how much I went over this on September 11th. September 11th had been carried out by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Now, Al-Qaeda was led by Osama bin Laden, and he was responsible for the September 11th attacks. Now, we believe that Osama bin Laden was hiding in the country of Afghanistan. Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda had actually, we had actually originally helped Al-Qaeda because they were fighting against the Soviet Union. But eventually, of course, as the world changes and the Cold War ended, eventually our relationship with the Middle Eastern world gets worse, and Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda turn against us. We will very shortly after 9/11 get involved in the war in Afghanistan. We're going to go over the war in Afghanistan later on next week. So for now, I will leave it there. Okay? But ultimately, what George W. Bush declares is not a war on the country of Afghanistan, but rather a war on terror. That terrorism around the globe, we will fight a war with. So we're not necessarily fighting a country, we're fighting terrorism. And whether those terrorists be in any nation, even nations that we are friends with, we will fight in that war against them. So with this, as part of this global war on terror, the United States has to shore up its security at home. And so Bush is going to get passed through Congress a law called the PATRIOT Act. The PATRIOT Act is going to be a law which allows the government to surveil the public, spy on the public, right? Spy on us, without a court order. Okay? Normally, for the government to spy on you or for the government to come and search your stuff, they would need a search warrant. But if they have some sort of suspicion of terrorism, they can do it without necessarily the normal warrant process. Basically, what this has led to is a lot of different things, but primarily the collection of data from our cell phones, from our computers, from our internet search history, right? If you type up things on the internet, if you send certain messages, that can sometimes flag our national security agencies, and they might look into the fact that you could be potentially a terrorist. Now, here's the problem with the Patriot Act a lot of people have. Okay, many people feel like this is a breach of our rights. Remember, we have the Bill of Rights that prevents a government from overreaching into our rights and into our lives. And so a lot of people argued and felt like the Patriot Act was a step too far in the name of security, taking away many of our freedoms and many of our rights. The stuff that you're going to look at this week in your case studies, which you're going to have to do, are really going to look at these issues that come up after September 11th. And you're going to kind of have to decide where you feel if it's right that we've kind of given up some of these rights for our security, or whether you think that's wrong. So that's where we're going to leave off. This is the only video this week because the case studies are a really big assignment. And then next week we'll finish up Bush's presidency and look at Obama's, and then finish up with our notes, okay? All right, guys, great job today. See ya.